in building up to 476, we want to just remind ourselves here where we are and what we've been studying. And particularly, I want to just take us to Milan, because in the period of the 300s, Rome is already losing its power, and power is already moving to other places. And one of the places it moves is Milan. So in the early 300s, already Milan is important in Italy, in the empire. So I want to take you there right now. And there's just a view across the Lombard plains looking to the Alps and up to the lakes, the Lago Maggiore and Lake Como, which are directly north of Milan. And here's a map of the city. And you can see there the inner yellow section is all surrounded with a wall. And that wall would have been the medieval wall. Some of it is still there, so you can see it if you visit Milan. The cathedral is right in the middle. You see that little square, little white house in that little blue square. That's the cathedral. That cathedral, of course, goes right to the 300s. So as soon as Christians are allowed to build churches, they build a church right there in the middle of the city, and the understructure of it, the original church, is still there. You can go down and visit it. It's under the current cathedral. And then up there on the left corner, you see the Castello Sforzesco. So that's a big medieval castle in the center of Rome, of Milan. Here's just a Google shot of it so that you can see the castle up there in the far left. And you can see the whiteness of the cathedral. The cathedral is filled with beautiful white marble, so that's what you see there with the big piazza in front of it. So what we want to do, there's the piazza. I know. Oh my God. The Cathedral of Milan is one of the most spectacular in the whole world. They've been working on it for like 600 years, and so finally got it finished in the 19th century. All of that beautiful marble, most of it is from Carrara. So there's the piazza in front of the Cathedral of Milan, and I want to just take you to Roman Milan, because, of course, Milan in 300 was a Roman city. As you see right here, these columns are still there. You can go visit. This is a contemporary picture. This is right in front of the Church of San Lorenzo, St. Lawrence, right in front of the Church of St. Lawrence. And I want to introduce you to this man here and now, because we haven't talked about him. Constantine the Great, the emperor of the Roman Empire. You can see his dates, 272 to 337. He's emperor for 30 years. And he takes the empire from the early 300s almost to the middle. His son reigns, his grandson. So during the 300s, there are generations of his family who lead the international Roman Empire. At this point, the Roman Empire is still as extensive as ever. It goes all the way to Scotland. It goes all the way down into Africa. It goes all the way to the eastern side of the Mediterranean and into Asia Minor. And what you see there on the screen at the bottom, the Edict of Milan 313, and here's a very nice little mosaic of him in Constantinople, which itself goes back to the 300s. This is on the walls of Hagia Sophia, the cathedral that he built in Constantinople. And you can see he's giving the church to us. He's presenting the church to the Christians. And this date, 313, we should all know, because this is the beginning of a new era for the empire. In 313, Christianity is made legal. The prohibitions against the Christians that had many of them executed are taken away, and he gives out the Edict of Milan. He's in Milan when he does it. That's why we call it the Edict of Milan. It would be pretty crazy to call it the Edict of Milan if he did it in Venice, wouldn't it? So it would be very, very confusing to people. So you can just take a guess. If somebody asks you, where did he give out the Edict of Milan? The answer is Milan. Very good, very good. And what did the edict say? Well, the edict said Christianity will be legal. It didn't make Christianity the religion of the empire. It didn't make all of Rome Christian. No. They were not all of Rome yet. They were a minority. They were 10%. So if the empire by this point was 100 million, then there were 10 million Christians. And this just made it legal. But the reason the date's important for us is everything that's public about Christianity derives from this date 313. So all the buildings, all the paintings, all the sculpture, it's all after 313. Because now, after 313, you can do it. You can build a church. You can build, and in Milan, you have churches that were started right after 313. So the 320s and the 330s, and we think maybe the oldest church in Europe may be the church of Sant'Ambrogio, that is St. Ambrose's church, where he is buried. Sant'Ambrogio may be the oldest church in Europe, meaning it comes from the 320s, that it was built right away in Milan. So, the Edict of Milan and Constantine and the empire from 300 to 400 is going to be completely different than it had ever been before, because now the leader of the empire was going to be a Christian. He isn't a Christian when he does this. He converts later. But by the time he dies, he's a Christian. And so he will lead not only the empire, but also the church. So if you think of the Council of Nicaea, where they write the creed, that is the Nicene Creed, 325, that is a meeting of all the Christians from all over the empire that whom he invites to Constantinople to Nicaea, a little town near Constantinople, invites all the bishops. He invited 1,800 priests and bishops from all over the church to come to this city and meet and write down what they all believed. Now, if you think about it, they didn't have to do that before then because they weren't having to proclaim those things publicly. So now they do. Now in the 320s, since Christianity is legal, since it's public, since they're building churches, they now have to be able to also say to people, what do you believe? Well, I believe this, 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 this. So the Council of Nicaea. And part of this moment is Ambrose. So here's the church of St. Ambrose in Milan, Sant'Ambrogio, and he's buried here. So if you go to Milan, go to St. Ambrose Church and go say hello to him. Say, I studied you in my Making the Western Mind, and I just wanted to come by and say hello, because he's there. That's the earliest mosaic picture we have of him. The import of Constantine and St. Ambrose is just the importance of Milan, so much a leadership city and location in the 300s, 350, 360, 370. And Ambrose, along with our friend from last week, St. Augustine of Hippo in North Africa, the two of them with Jerome, as you all remember, are right at this moment fashioning their thoughts and their ideas about Roman civilization, Roman Empire, Christian religion, Jesus of Nazareth, all these things. Both of them, both St. Ambrose and Augustine and Jerome, are all working to try to answer that question that we talked about last week, which is, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? But you want to learn it in Latin. You want to be able to say this in Latin because all your friends will be very proud. So you just study this, right, Roger? Right? Just toss it off down there when you're spinning. You just spin that right out. Quid Athenae Hieroselymus? What does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? What does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? In other words, the generation between 300 and 400, led by these three greatest figures, Augustine, Ambrose, and Jerome, all who know each other, that generation will have to answer that question, what does this Greek heritage of science and philosophy have to do with Abraham and David and Isaac and Jesus of Nazareth? What do the two have to do with each other? They're completely different from completely different cultures. So why do we have to bother bringing them together? They answered the question with the word everything. What does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? They said everything, and therefore we will have to bring them together, and that's what they did. So that generation of the year 400, particularly these three, will take the opportunity to publicly state, how does Greek philosophy come together with Judeo-Christian spiritual interpretations of things? And what they did was the basis of the whole of the Middle Ages, because every single generation afterwards, in the 400s, the 500s, the 600s, and 700s, went back to them and started with them. Everybody else, every name I give you later tonight, Benedict, Boniface, every one of them, they all go and study these people. And fortunately, these people convince later generations that they were right, that the conclusions that they drew, that Athens was connected to Jerusalem, were right. There are interesting little deviations. And one of my most favorite are those monks in the 7, 8, and 900 sitting in some tiny little monastery, up on a mountain somewhere in Switzerland. And he hasn't gotten all the messages yet. And he's working on texts on vellum, which means, lambskin. So all the books in the Middle Ages are written on skins, because they couldn't get paper anymore. They couldn't get papyrus from Egypt, so they have to just turn to skins, which are way more expensive, harder to make, harder to treat. So there he was working on this very precious animal skin vellum page, and it was a copy of Ovid. Now, Ovid was one of the many great Roman writers, but he was not believed to be exactly inspired by the Holy Spirit, because Ovid wrote about sex, say, the book of love, right? And in the Middle Ages, of course, in the 700, 800, 900s, a monk who was handed by some librarian a book by Ovid on the book of love would say, oh my goodness, we're not studying this here in the monastery. We're not doing any of this. So he would erase the Ovid from the vellum and then write a new book on top of it. And of course, at the time, the old book would disappear. Now, in 2015, all we have to do is do a little radiography and a little fancy, and we can bring the old book right back. But I chuckle. Isn't that funny when you think about it? I just chuckle at the values, because when Augustine, Ambrose, and Jerome are saying, oh, all the great works of Greece and Rome are important, they really meant all. But now later, in the 700s and the 800s, with the monastic values, one little monk in this little tiny monastery up on the mountain in Switzerland, who's handed a hot, sexy book on the art of love, had to decide, well, maybe that isn't a good use of this very precious vellum, so I'll erase it, erase. So then it would disappear. The ink would disappear, and he would write a new one on top of it. But we can still find it. So I just like that. So in the ensuing centuries, some monks answered that question, nothing. You see, you get it? What does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? Every once in a while, one little monk would say, nothing, and erase Athens, see? Erase Rome, right? Get it? Get what I mean? So, this generation, this great generation, answers the question, everything, and because of them and thanks to them, we have the heritage of Greece and Rome. If they'd answered that question differently, everything would have changed in civilization, Western civilization.